These are the 5 guys from Music Row who played on virtually every country hit of the 90s, every George Strait record, every Alan Jackson single, every Garth Brooks anthem, every Brooks and Dunn barn burner. If you loved 90s country, you were listening to the same 5 musicians over and over again, and you had absolutely no idea. Their names are Brent Mason, Eddie Bayers, Paul Franklin, John Hobbs, and Glenn Worf. Guitar, drums, steel guitar, keyboards, and bass. They called themselves the Players, and honestly that might be the most humble band name in music history, considering these guys collectively played on thousands of recordings, won over 60 major industry awards, and shaped the sound of an entire decade working with producers like Tony Brown, James Stroud, and Kyle Lanning. Let's start with the man on drums, because without him, this group doesn't exist. Eddie Bayers was born in 1949 as a military kid, bouncing around from Maryland to North Africa to Oakland to Philadelphia. Here's the wild part though, he came to Nashville to play keyboards. He was classically trained on piano, studying Bach and Beethoven, but somewhere along the way, he picked up drumsticks, and that changed everything. 300 gold and platinum albums later, he'd earned 14 Academy of Country Music Drummer of the Year awards, including 11 straight wins from 1991 through 2001. Nobody could touch this man. In 2022, he became the first drummer ever inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, alongside Ray Charles and the Judds. Before Nashville, though, he was hanging around the Bay Area playing with Jerry Garcia and members of Creedence Clearwater Revival, just casually. Now on guitar, Brent Mason, self-taught. He grew up playing in a family band with his parents, and his brother Randy played drums. By the 1990s, this man was working 23 sessions a week. Let that sink in for a second, 23 sessions a week. He has played on over 1,000 major label albums, and he won 12 Academy of Country Music Guitarist of the Year awards and 2 Country Music Association Musician of the Year awards. You know that iconic guitar lick on Alan Jackson's Chattahoochee? That lightning-fast chicken pickin'? That's Brent Mason. He practically invented the 1990s Nashville guitar sound when he dragged his smoky, buzzy Fender amp into the studio and pioneered what he called the Rockin' Roadhouse sound. One of the earliest sessions he recorded that way was the very first Brooks and Dunn album. It's not just country either. This man played on soundtracks for A Few Good Men, Home Alone, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and Bridget Jones's Diary. He recorded commercials for Dodge, Ford, Wrangler jeans, and the opening to NFL Monday Night Football. On pedal steel guitar, Paul Franklin. This man might have the most bittersweet career in Nashville history. He started as a teenager, playing on Gallery's #1 hit, It's So Nice to Be With You, in 1972. He toured with Barbara Mandrell, Vince Gill, Jerry Reed, and eventually Dire Straits. Mark Knopfler called him up in 1991, and next thing you know, Franklin was touring the world and recording on every street. By the late 1980s, he was booking 3 sessions a day in Nashville. He has played on over 500 albums and won 18 ACM awards. He invented custom instruments called the Pedabro, the box, and the baritone steel guitar. You know that signature sound on Randy Travis's Forever and Ever Amen? That is Franklin playing the Pedabro, an instrument his own father innovated. But here's the heartbreaking part. Paul Franklin was nominated for CMA Musician of the Year 32 times and lost every single one. 32 times. That is a CMA record nobody wants. Then in 2025, on his 33rd nomination, he finally won. 33 nominations. The most nominated person in CMA history. Today, he is still out there touring with Chris Stapleton. On bass, Glenn Worf. Born in Dayton, Ohio, raised in Madison, Wisconsin, he picked up the bass at 13 and never looked back. He moved to Nashville in 1979 and became one of the most in-demand session bassists the city has ever seen. Don Was, legendary producer, was once asked by Bass Player magazine about his favorite bass players to hire. He said there's a guy in Nashville named Glenn Worf who plays an upright through an Ampeg B18, and it is an ungodly sound. Mark Knopfler heard Warf play one time and said, "I knew with Glenn straight away. Now this here is bass playing." He won ACM Bass Player of the Year 7 consecutive times from 2000 to 2006, then again in 2017 and 2019. He has played on literally thousands of recordings, and he is still going. In 2025, he played on Willie Nelson's album, "Oh What a Beautiful World." Finally, on keyboards, John Hobbs, born in Long Beach, California in 1950. Before Nashville, he was deep in the Los Angeles session scene, scoring music for television shows and films, and playing on records for George Jones, Tom Jones, Barry Manilow, and Olivia Newton-John. Early in his career, his band The Four Sounds entered a Battle of the Bands contest and came in second. The band that beat them was Karen and Richard Carpenter, who went on to become the Carpenters. From 1984 to 1994, Hobbs commuted between Los Angeles and Nashville, flying in 8 to 10 weeks a year for sessions. Then he realized something. Nashville was home. He said the thing about Nashville is that there's a sense of community among music people that he had never felt in Los Angeles. He moved permanently and never looked back. He won 10 Academy of Country Music Keyboard Player of the Year awards. He won a Grammy in 2007 for producing Vince Gill's These Days. His piano and keys are all over classics like You're Still the One, Strawberry Wine, and Does Fort Worth Ever Cross Your Mind? Nashville doesn't record music the way the rest of the world does. In most cities, musicians lay down their parts separately, one at a time, in isolation. In Nashville, the entire band plays together, live, in the same room, often using the Nashville number system to communicate chord changes instantly. When someone is paying double scale to half a dozen players and over $2,000 a day for the studio and engineer, you better get your part right on the first pass. Your chops are out in the open on every session, with 5 or 6 other musicians watching your every move. That is the pressure these 5 guys thrived under, day after day, year after year, in legendary rooms like RCA Studio B where Elvis and Chet Atkins once recorded. In 2002, Eddie Bayers got them together for what was supposed to be a one-time concert, but it stuck. They became the Players and stayed together for 11 years, releasing a live DVD featuring guest appearances by Peter Frampton, Vince Gill, Travis Tritt, and Sean Colvin. In 2019, all 5 were inducted into the Musicians Hall of Fame, carrying on a tradition started by the original Nashville A-Team of the 1950s and the 1960s. These 5 men were the invisible engine behind the greatest era of country music. They never stood at the front of the stage. Their names were not on the album covers, but every time you cranked up a 90s country song and felt something in your chest, that feeling had 5 fingerprints on it, and now you know exactly whose they were.